Welcome to everybody who's joining us. We've got a great session set up today. My name's Jeff Andrews, President of Business of Childcare, and we welcome you to our conversation on fueling the yes, right? How do we create funding strategies that work? And I'm joined today by Mayor Jeff Annis from Mapleton, Minnesota. Mayor Annis has been leading the local group just south of Mankato, for those of you who might not be as geographically understanding. Great community, about 1,700 folks. They just had their groundbreaking last month on the first ever child care house. And this, as we've covered in several of the other roundtables, really an output of a several year process, right? Doing community planning, even before that, doing some inventorying of needs and opportunities and over the last several years, going through an intentional process that really has helped evaluate all of the options, right? Maybe a child care center at one point, maybe some other incentives, and all tools and things that are helpful, but as the community has figured out, weren't necessarily matching up to what their longer term needs and outcomes are. And so today we're going to talk about what Mapleton's experience has been. We're going to talk a little bit about how we got to yes, as far as a funding perspective. So this is one of the challenges that we often see in communities where projects and good intentions are besieged or beset, right, by the lack of funding or the ability to identify funding sources. So before we get started, I'd love to give a moment for Mayor Annis to introduce himself and share a little bit about their moment getting to here. Mayor Annis, welcome.
All right, thanks. Yeah, Jeff Annis. I was in education for 34 years, retired, and then I don't know, someone paid me the $2 to file for mayor, and so I've started my second term, and right from the beginning, it was the lack of childcare spots, slots, I guess you call them, and people were just having to travel too far to really get their daycare and actually planning out, having to plan way ahead as to, where they might be able to get a open spot. But and again, that whole piece there too stalled out our progress as a community because again, for us to even bring in any kind of business, whether it was even 6 to 12 employers with, a family. So you say you're even bringing in 6 to 12 extra kids. Where do they go? So again, people just weren't going to. We weren't favorably looked at, I guess, even though we're located really well. Um, that whole part, we just didn't quite complete the whole circle, and so we got connected with Jeff and his team and went through everything. I mean, I'm glad those days for us are done. But again, that's the process you need to go through, and the things that we've learned. And again, daycare centers work for people, work for places. Again, you got to find out what really works for you. And again, this whole house setting fit for us because again, it was manageable from a dollar and cents point of view, and it was manageable from filling slots, and then also creating economic development, having a provider come in and really start a business there. And so again, from a lot of perspectives, this made a lot of sense to us, and for us in Mapleton, the numbers worked for us, and it didn't drain our budget. And again, even uh, as we continue now to get closer and closer, it continues to get more exciting, and knowing that we're on the verge of getting this project done to across the finish line and create some more slots for our daycare people in Mapleton.
Exactly. And it's been a journey, and we're going to talk about the biggest part of that journey in just a minute. We're going to get into today the funding strategies, right? How do we fuel the yes? Uh, for those of you who have been on our sessions previously or haven't before, our previous sessions and the takeaways are available on our website. But our first session was getting to the yes just in people. The second session was really focused on understanding the ROI of the yes, right? Why, beyond the obvious of smiling children and all those great things, is this going to work? But we still were stuck, right, with that question of how will we pay for it? And so our session today will help us dig into that. And before we get started, just a quick overview for those of you who aren't familiar. Business of Childcare, our mission is to guide childcare business owners and the communities they serve to better outcomes. We just celebrated our 4-year anniversary last month and continue to do work here in Minnesota where we're based, as well as all the way out east to western North Carolina, out into South Dakota, in a number of states through the heartland. Our focus, beyond the obvious outcomes for children and families, is the idea that childcare unlocks economic potential, economic growth, right? If people have care that they can count on, care that they believe is doing a good job, they can go and be their best selves and whatever it is they're doing, which is often finding employment, as Mayor Annis has highlighted, locally or nearby. And when we look at childcare, we look at how this, at the end of the day, benefits everybody. Everybody in the community benefits when we have childcare. Our work, as we work with communities, is really to think about the whole community as the opportunity, right? And often for different reasons, and sometimes reasons that previously we hadn't necessarily even thought about. But the big one, obviously, is outcomes for kids. And when we have good providers and we have families who can find the providers that match their needs, we know that leads to better outcomes. Business of childcare as overall, our work and focus is really focused on the 3 stages of readiness and helping communities at whichever stage they're in. Mayor Annis and Mapleton started, as many do, in stage 1. What is the impact, right? What is the challenge and or the opportunity? And as they went through and understood there was, in fact, a challenge and an opportunity, then they positioned themselves and went through the process of building a plan, right? You got to have an address for success every time you get in the car and go somewhere, no different than when we're taking on challenges for childcare. And then we're doing more and more work as we're seeing here with Child Care House and other projects around the country, helping communities take a plan and activating that plan into an outcome, right? At the end of the day, we don't want to sit and admire the challenge anymore. We have to get to an outcome that matters. And our big highlight from this past year, 2024, wrapping up work with Moultrie County down in central eastern Illinois. Great outcomes, 100% retention of their providers over the 2 years of programming support. We're expanding their capacity by 78% and a 300% increase in the quality ratings participation by family providers there in that local county. Big impacts for small communities. That's what our approach is. Let's find the right size solution. And so let's talk about it as we get started here. And for those of you joining us, you're going to love the conversation that we're able to go back and forth with. But when we think about projects, right? We think about why projects struggle to get funded. We talk about really kind of 4 key items, right? One is the obvious for many, and even in Mapleton, going through the exercise of expanding, growing the child care center, the math didn't, right? The operating model didn't make sense. When we think about that, then it becomes difficult as a financing entity or otherwise to think about how will that business repay the capital investment, the real estate loan, the mortgage, or other dollars that need to be coming through there. And often when we think about the reality, we need to know and understand ROI for childcare isn't necessarily observed in day 1. Certainly by the end of year 1, when we've got 10 adults back working, we can count on what those dollars look like. When we look at a longer stream, 20 years, and a multiplier effect of wages being realized and wages being then spent out into the community, the ROI becomes much more significant. But we often realize that sometimes our patience is not as long-winded. And so we think about that, and then we think about the fact that often funding, I have a slide in a different presentation that kind of has an ATM and says with a big X around it, there is no ATM for childcare, right? There's a lot of different sources of funding. We're going to get into those today, but thinking about understanding and awareness, Mayor Annis, when you think about as the community started to position funding, and obviously had the benefit of our funding roadmap approach, but even before that came through, what was your thoughts or the community's thoughts or maybe even hesitation on how will we pay for whatever it is the solution is we come together? Would you want to share with the audience a little bit about that?
Well, again, I think the scary part of any mayor or city administrator or city government. is how do we pay for all these things? Again, when you're looking at maybe having to get a new road in, or as we just had to go through almost a $750,000, if not more, fire truck that has to get put on the books. So how does all this work? And again, when we were looking at the center, it just it's a scary thing trying to navigate and figure out how do we fund that? So again, now when we scale back and now we can, spend significantly less, even though we're getting fewer slots, where I think we're going to be much more efficient. And so, that whole concept makes it much easier for us to maybe get, say, if we need 60 slots, to put in six of these houses systematically and throughout our community where the needs are is much more attainable, and it helps a mayor sleep at night, I think, a little bit easier. But to the point I think that I want to end with is, we really started looking at this as part of our infrastructure. How it to us, it's another amenity that we can have in our community where, if that business wants to come in, we can say, yeah, we've got this daycare house, or we're going to help you, figure out how, again, a business can come, and if they've got already 10 kids they think they're going to have, well, we can help, get this daycare done in a rather short fashion by using a daycare house for that business to come in. So, whether it's parks, whether it's roads, whether it's fire trucks, or whatever it might be, as far as all this infrastructure work, this now has become, as far as I'm concerned, a part of our discussion all the time, as far as being that infrastructure for our community and that amenity that really can make us very attractive. And not being far from Mankato, maybe we can reverse that. Instead of our people going to Mankato, people from Mankato are now coming out to Mapleton for their daycare, because again, we've got the ability to systematically put in and build our daycare.
Absolutely. Well, you highlight again the idea that all the infrastructure examples that you highlight, they all play a role in our community, right? The road is the obvious one. The fire truck might even be, right? We need fire trucks in town, or we've got a converse problem. But what I've also always, I think, found interesting is that more and more community leaders, is even such as yourself, realize that the childcare infrastructure, if we want to think about it that way, actually serves as economic development infrastructure, right? Because different from the road and the fire truck, its sole purpose, beyond helping make kids great, also serves a parent purpose, right? And actually sends people to work. And we talk about in Mapleton 10 slots, and what does that mean? Well, using the per capita, it's about $400,000 a year in wage potential that now can be realized with those slots available. And again, when we start to think about where does that money go? Well, it goes down to Maggie J's. It goes down to the other elements of our community. It gets invested in real estate. It gets invested in what maintains our community. And so I think it's a really good highlight. The other thing that we think about too in funding and projects is, what's our exit plan? Right, and you highlight one of the other challenges that we sometimes run into with different childcare type projects is many childcare centers are built as a single use, one purpose commercial building. And if unfortunately somewhere down the road we don't need that building anymore, the conversion dollars, even the buyer market is much more reduced. Whereas examples like the childcare house suddenly create an exit ramp for communities or others at some point who maybe say, hey, 15 years even from now, 20 years from now, maybe we're not going to need this anymore. Well, any town I've been into, they all have housing basically as the number one element that they'd like to have more of. So it's also about thinking about these investments in ways that provides mitigation of risk or outcome, and provide some paths forward. You had the benefit of working with one of our partners, Rural Pathways, on your funding roadmap, and we know as we went through that process, and one of the things that we'll talk through now next is really the different spheres of money, we might reference them, is that there's actually a lot of different buckets of money. I think you even mentioned, as we went through that process, 15 different types of dollars. I won't highlight all of them today, but talk a little bit just from a perspective of somebody such as yourself who isn't a professional grant writer, isn't a professional, person doing this. You made the comment a little bit daunting if I were to take that or we were to take that on ourselves. What is that? Tell a little bit for the audience what that means. Like, what is that? When you say daunting, does it mean it might not have happened possibly without that support?
Yeah, again, we as mayors, like I was a teacher, right? I mean, I could write the local grant, and again, when we start getting into state and federal dollars, there are certain things and expectations and benchmarks and the real verbiage that needs to go on. So the people making some of these decisions on, hundreds of thousands and even sometimes millions of dollars, that they understand and they get the concept. So what I was really afraid of early on was, when we were having these written, was that they wouldn't understand what we were really trying to get at as far as it being a daycare house and
Right.
all the things that you've already talked about, being able to, create some slots, and if it doesn't work or 20 years from now when that's really not needed, it can be just a house. So again, but they did see it right away. And again, to having, that little expertise and being able to write it. And then again, then after that, I mean, then you go, oh, you look at it, you go, to me, it was almost like, AI has taken over, how we sometimes write letters or emails. And it was like, these writers were able to do it from the get-go because they're the AIs of doing these,
Right,
and
right,
they've
exactly
seen
right.
them, they've been down this path before. And but I'll tell you this right now, if there's one, you'll never get a yes unless you apply. And many times we were probably one of a few, and I don't even know what the percentages are. And at this point, it doesn't matter. But for us to get it on the first try, say our deed grant out of Minnesota for this project, maybe we were just lucky, or it was an innovative, cutting edge, dealing with a very high profile kind of crisis around the state and the country. Um, you know, that we took a chance and we got the money. And now again, those things just start to build. And when you can start, getting on that ground floor, starting to move up the ladder, just things seem to trickle in a little bit easier because people are understanding, people are seeing. But again, until you make that effort and figure out that part of how to actually, you need to apply. They
Right.
always say, I'm not going to win the lottery if I don't buy a ticket. Um, well, to us, this was almost the lottery as far as that, because again, this one, in my eyes, is a stepping stone for two and three
Right.
coming down the near future. But we you had to do that. So, you really need to figure what works best for you. But again, don't shy away from any big thing, and talk to your legislators and your representatives, and keep giving them the word and letting them know that things are there, because they have influence. And I think that's another excuse me, another key thing. So you've got to apply, otherwise you're never going to get it. And you just got to keep plugging away.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that's, I think, for those joining us and thinking about how do we get to the yes, right? How do we fuel the project, the effort, the momentum that we have? Our approach is really for communities to start segmenting the opportunities of funding. And in our funding roadmap, as I mentioned before, we really look at 15 different sources from federal all the way down to, and we're going to highlight a good number of them today, local, even charitable gambling. In Minnesota, we have a thing called pull tabs, and boy, if you've ever been in a local establishment that has pull tabs, people love pull tabs here. But the best part of it is they all charitably fund different programming and different efforts in communities. And so our belief is that because childcare benefits the whole community, why not look at funding it from a whole community perspective, and in this sense expand the horizon. So as you start to put your strategies together, you start to look at, as our teams do with each of our projects, what are the parameters that make us special? Right? There were a few conditions. I won't share all the secret sauce on it, but with the Mapleton opportunity related to the local or the state Minnesota deed grant, there were several focus areas that, by being in one category or another, prioritize or give priority points to different programs. So this is where, again, if you're not confident, find a partner, find a professional that can help you work through those things. But as you start to look at the different funding mechanisms, I want to highlight a few of them for our benefit today. We start obviously at the top, and this one in the moment has a bit of an unknown, right? And as happens often as things change, we sometimes ebb and flow, and that's the other reason why we believe in a broad spectrum of funding, because in some moments of time, one might be stronger or more available than another. When we looked at those untapped federal levers, right, we're seeing less and less of the ARPA and the CARES money or residuals there. But we're more and more seeing a continued focus on USDA, the rural development, the community facilities opportunities. For some of you in different states, we worked on a project a year ago that received some congressionally directed spending as well. So your local state, or excuse me, U.S. representatives, senators, all have the opportunity in some cases to help direct spending to their local areas. And then in many communities, in many places, we think about the block grants, right? The community development block grants and the different uses there. These are, again, are sometimes a longer play, right? Federal funding often comes with a few more strings, maybe a few more elements. USDA financing sometimes might require even a special auditor level of work on some of those elements. All of those, though, are not barriers. They're just sometimes extra steps or additional work that you have to do. And the real pro tip here is that if you're working on a project, especially a larger funded project, the sooner you can engage your U.S. representative or your U.S. senators, a news brief, invite them to an event. I know at the groundbreaking, Jeff, we had here a couple of weeks ago, a representative from U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar's office had come along and presented and talked. And so it gives awareness, right, to those projects. And believe it or not, sometimes that's the difference maker when we start to think about some of the federal dollars and federal opportunities. So again, you're really starting at the beginning, doing a sketch out of these different levels, these different realms, and starting to get some focus.
One thing I'd like to throw in is, too, is to connect with those people and connect with your area foundations and your area regional development groups. I know we're Region 9 development. And again, reaching out to those people, we just, I was at a mayor clerk meeting and he spoke at that. And because of the numbers, Mapleton qualified for some median income opportunity that pays out 80, 60, 40. They pay 60% to 40%. And because of, you may have heard about the Rapidan Dam that, fell and the water all went down the river and the dam broke in Blue Earth County. We're in Blue Earth County. So now all of a sudden, even though we really don't have a lot of flooding issues, we're qualified for 80-20. The federal government will pay 80% to the 20%. So now if we do have lift stations, if we do have retention ponds, if we had some things that we were thinking about doing, look, now we're getting an 80% little bonus for doing that, just because we sort of we were there, we asked for a meeting, a Zoom call, and now all of a sudden we found out all these different opportunities for our community, just basically because we asked. And 2 weeks ago, I didn't even know. So again, there's just more opportunity for that. So it's just a matter of getting out and just continuing to ask and see what's out there.
Well, you're absolutely right. As we start to bring our lens in from that federal landscape, right? Mariana's highlighting as we continue, right? And we'll continue highlighting, but even the state, right? In Minnesota, we're fortunate as we think about the framing tip here at the bottom, presenting childcare, even within your application structure, in certain ways can make it more attractive to certain grants and other opportunities than other, right? And so this again comes back to having a partner that helps navigate that, because the same application can't be written and submitted to all of these, right? The different nuances and different understandings. And so when we look at state level opportunities here in Minnesota, as I highlighted, Mapleton, we'll talk about, by the way, at the end, an overview of how they've gotten to yes and moving forward. But Minnesota is not just, you don't just look up the early ed and childcare or DHS or others. The Department of Employment and Economic Development has been at the table and contributing significant funding to projects around the state of Minnesota for the last handful of years. So thinking about and looking at those opportunities, thinking about and connecting childcare and workforce, and sometimes additionally unlock dollars that are aligned to workforce support, workforce growth. Even in a lot of our states, certainly within even early childhood, we're seeing more and more activity around state innovation or pilot funds. So if you're looking and working on some effort or some project that maybe takes a step out of the ordinary from the normal, it gives you an opportunity to possibly attract some dollars that way. And we also know that as a normal standby, some states have grants that are tied or come from kind of the quality and licensing realm, focused on materials, focused on equipment, focused on even things like a playground. Believe it or not, there are grantors out there that will fund those playgrounds. So really a lot of opportunities. Again, we start to kind of look at this funnel. I always say it's an upside one or a triangle, right? You start smaller at the top as opportunities, a much wider breadth of opportunities as you continue to move down from the domains, right? So we start to look now at that more regional level, right? And in some cases, as Mayor Annis highlighted, there's organizations like Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation who may not provide or be the direct capital injections, but provide dollars, funding, and even voices to support projects, right? So as much as it is about funding, it's also about having the team standing behind the proverbial checks that are also advocating and helping provide visibility on some of these opportunities. So I think there's, again, when we get into that realm, some things for us to think about. The regional foundations, another great opportunity. Counties are another great domain. We've worked with a lot of counties around the country on just broader childcare strategies. When we start to look into funding, they sometimes can unlock and have available other dollars. They sometimes can have opportunities to abate property taxes. There's a lot of different ways, even in-kind support. We have one community in Illinois building a new center. The county government is actually going to take care of the snow removal and the lawn care. Why? Because it's right next door to the other property they're taking care of, and that becomes, again, a support mechanism. No dollars are trading hands, but no dollars are trading hands, meaning we're not paying out for that expense over the long term. So different loan funds, different things like that. Certainly the block grant opportunities, but it's local capacity, right? Because at the end of the day, our counties are made up of communities, and those communities ultimately are where our commissioners of counties live. And so I always say there is a much tighter bond and connection there. Mayor Annis, I know you've worked with the region and Greater Mankato Growth and others. Has that regional engagement been helpful in your efforts, both here and otherwise?
Well, yeah, I mean, we like the Mankato Area Foundation, and like I said, the region, Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, all those people you just make connections with, because you just never know. Like I said earlier, until you ask, you'll never know. And just simply the Mankato Area Foundation is a huge foundation that's got a lot of big hitters. And again, it takes that one connection to make, especially getting in with childcare. And then again, we're located fairly nicely as far as within our county. We're right in the middle of our county, so now we've become regional. A lot of traffic coming through our community going to Mankato for work. So again, if we become the sort of the daycare hub of Minnesota, that'd be absolutely cool. Just to be able to have that. And again, this I hope is just the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean that we're able to help others get to where we are now. And that's what I think my biggest takeaway, if I were sitting over in someone's shoes listening here today, is okay, we got to start planning and just connect over there and keep connecting with Mapleton and the progress and how it's going to go. Because again, I think once people see what it all can do, I think they'll be really impressed. And I think it becomes, for us, to me, it was a no-brainer to do this because again, the the level of that we had to get to as far as dollars and risk involved with the ROI potential just made it such an easy decision for us to make. But regionally, again, whether it's state, whether it's region, whether it's local, again, we just need to continue getting the word out and asking and making connections.
Well, and what you highlight though too is that drive, and because we get it to a place that it's a much more consumable and manageable number, right? Like you said, we're not looking for $5 million. We always think about, child care house, a child care center, an in-home family child care, whatever it is. Factual point is they're all in a town. They all have an address in a community. And so this is where I think it really kind of connects right at the main point, right? When our municipal and our township and our other councils of government can be a part of this, it also, I think, lifts up visibility for some of those other tiers of funding that we've just gone through. Right? Because if you're out there by yourself, if you're Jeff, just in whatever town you are trying to do something, you are just that. But when you bring in all these others who at the end of the day exist because you exist, suddenly we've increased our buying power, right? So we see some different tools and levers, right? We have different things that people can look at. We've even seen, believe it or not, some instances where some sales tax is being reallocated, even in the smallest towns, to support local childcare efforts. Because what we're starting to realize is that we don't need $1 billion or $1 million solution, right? What we need is the opportunity to get some infrastructure set up. And even if you're not building new, you may have existing space that can be repurposed as a hosted space, right? And nonetheless, those even have smaller budgets, which often can be taken care of at a lower, more local level, right? Which allows us to get done. Even the site donation, right? The local EDA in Mapleton, in this case, was the purchaser or the buyer of the property that the child care house is going to be located in. So they have the levers of those and sometimes have opportunities to provide some next steps. As I mentioned, I think there's always the opportunity to get creative. And as you look at your landscape, and after this slide, I'll share a little bit of our new initial efforts for funding that's somewhat aligned to this. But there's a lot of different ways to get buy-in at the local level. We already highlighted pull tabs, charitable gambling, and even can be the raffles that sometimes communities have, right? It may be that there's a lease or an opportunity where a civic property that's open can be leveraged at little or no cost outside of the normal operating, right? Heat and utilities, things like that. We also know that there's individuals and others that are looking for opportunities to invest in something for the good of the community. These are ways in which you can provide opportunities, often aligned to capital investments. So there's at some point potentially a return. We've even seen examples of what's referred to as social REITs, real estate investment trusts that exist and get a return, but keep investing that return back into whatever that social good is that they're focused on. As a matter of fact, even in child care facilities, there are some emerging opportunities around that. So again, it's keeping your eyes open and understanding that the best visibility there is your local wealth advisors or financial planners or others who may be working with a local farmer on their estate planning, maybe working with a family that's returned town after years. I've heard all the different stories and opportunities. It's really, again, as Mayor Annis highlighted, getting the word out there, right? Getting the visibility on the opportunity, as we say, giving people something to buy. Even in a charitable giving, we still got to give them something that they see is going to be a return on that. When you start looking a little bit deeper, there's also naming rights, right? You can name the playground at the new center you're building. You can name your child care house the XYZ Company Child Care House. We see these types of activities play out everywhere else. It's an opportunity without impacting care, without impacting the provider, and hopefully keeping your rates of care as affordable as they may be. It's another way to take that burden off and provide a local visibility to the local insurance agent or the local bank or whoever else it is that may be interested in something like that. And then more broadly, right, community events, community campaigns, the local farmers market, having a setup there each Saturday morning. I know Mayor Annis talked a little bit. You've got an event coming up in the middle of August that you're going to weave in some of the celebrations around the work for childcare. Talk just a minute about that.
Right. And so, with a number of these things, again, getting not the word out earlier was to, your the legislators and your government people, and then to your foundations and to some of your big hitters. But now, look, if you get it out to someone in the public, just regular residents, they may know someone who knows someone, or maybe their family is having to deal with, the loss of somebody, and what are they going to do? And wouldn't that be, the family may get together and say, wouldn't that be really nice if we were able to, you know, support a child care house in our community in honor of mom and dad, or whoever that might be, or whatever that is. Just getting that word out. So we continually, as we have our songs on the lawn, sort of what Jeff is referring to, and now we've incorporated our public services, our fire, police, um, as well, to have join us in the event. And we're going to have a sort of a, I guess, announcements, and more of a celebration of this daycare house. So again, continuing to get that out, the word out. And one other thing that I have found now, as I've tried to do some more grants, is it's June, and the first quarter is done, and we're in obviously in the second quarter. And a lot of, for whatever reasons, a lot of the bigger companies and foundations and businesses, their grants, they seem to just do first quarter, and then it's sort of done. Um, so I found out that we missed the boat on a number of good opportunities with different, even utility companies and other foundations, that, it's closed. Sorry, the money's already been allocated. Get back to us in next November, next December, and we'll replenish after the first of the year, that kind of thing. So, I think getting out and again, it's been good for us having the daycare house, because we're also trying to raise $250,000 for, playground equipment and that kind of thing. So now that all has helped us in our process of trying to, you know, garner funds for that project. But just knowing when, and having I just created a spreadsheet of all the different potential funding sources and what their timeline sort of is. And so now as we go, I'll say, well, no, we're not even going to try there, because again, that's closed, but we got to look, this is November. Okay, now we got to start organizing and start doing that. So really finding out what's available, what the timelines look like, again, what are some of the specifics that they may be looking for, those kinds of things. So, whether that's, regionally or locally, those are good things to find out and get down on paper.
When you highlight that fundraising, money raising, capital raising, whatever term you want to attach to it, really isn't a one-time deal, right? It really should be an ongoing strategy. And as we work with a lot of communities, if they don't already have an existing legal entity, right? Might be for instance, the community foundation there locally, or it might be something else. We encourage communities to create a nonprofit or other entity to be the carrier of opportunity for childcare, not just for one particular initiative, but to support things like this, where there's an ongoing awareness, application, and otherwise to funds and dollars that are available, as you said, not just always, but maybe at certain times of the year. And so it gives us a little bit more opportunity. The other benefit that it has is that without that strong entity like the Mapleton EDA, who has been the partner officially, you have trouble where will somebody write a check to, right? If they do want to provide a grant, if they do want to write a philanthropic outcome, where would they write the check to? And so all of these are things that initially, as you get started, you want to be thinking about.
The other thing is, and I'm sure a lot of you are, I mean, we have our Mapleton Area Foundation, and again, that's sort of the vehicle, as Jeff is talking about. That can help be the place where the funds go and where they're sort of funneled through. And again, those are, writing a check is one thing, but swiping the debit or swiping the credit card and going online, now that opens up. I mean, it's as simple as putting together a nice email and being able to send it to a lot of people all over the country. Because again, a lot of people, when they say, they'll say, well, Mapleton is where I call home. Well, now you can support home, and every community has got people that have been successful, and they want to help, and they want to help where they grew up. That's it's just you create those emotional ties and connections, and now you're getting money from places in Texas and California and Florida from other people that were there at one time where they grew up there, and going on and on. It just opens up so many avenues. And then we've also used our foundation that committed money to it for a matching situation. So now that becomes a win-win-win for everybody involved, because the foundation's getting more exposure for what they're doing. You're putting it to a good cause. It becomes a tax write-off. All these different things are all positive things for us that we can leverage by using those local charitable groups.
Absolutely. And by the way, for those joining us, if you have any questions, I encourage you to go ahead and submit those. We are getting closer to the end of the plan conversation, but I thought it would be fun to highlight because I think it also provides for those that want to maybe take a run at this on their own, a little bit of a quick and easy path to follow. How is Mapleton stacking the dollars, right? Because that's what this becomes. It isn't, as Mayor Anna said early on, one source that is going to provide the whole outcome off. And we think it's a big deal to start with just real math, right? Be able to articulate why you're doing one thing versus another. And you don't need, hundreds of pages of studies to tell you that, right? It's again a somewhat back of the napkin math exercise. But the more that you have is real math, both on opportunities for a provider that might take on whatever you might be going after, to the families who will benefit from not driving a half hour the other way. It helps us really start to think about, from our last session, what is the ROI on whatever investment it is that we might think about making. I think the big thing too, we just highlighted, the Mapleton project, as you'll see once everything is finalized, is really combining, right, a diverse set of funding sources. There's going to be a national announcement. There's the deed grant we've talked about. There's already been a regional corporate foundation and a number of smaller contributors that Mayor Addis and others and the funding roadmap have really illustrated as the path to getting to a place where as much, if not as all, of the project is accounted for from sources other than taking out a loan when we can help that, right? Always better to benefit from those who want us to support us. And then also thinking about, again, as you look at whatever the project is, whatever the model is, what does it look like beyond getting built? Right? One of the challenges that we often overlook is that all the excitement, all the energy is on, hey, how will we raise the 3 million or the 5 million or whatever million it often is? No one often is asking the immediate question of, and how will it operate? Will it need subsidy? Will it need something beyond what we're even raising here? Because that's where it starts to also get challenging, is if you can't illustrate that it will walk on its own, so to speak, it becomes even more difficult to attract funding at the beginning. And so that real math combined with a aligned outcome is a really critical detail. And I think lastly, making sure that we're also thinking about the secondary benefits and thinking about that multiplier effect, right? Whether it's the spend from the family who suddenly has a second wage to an employer who suddenly, as Mayor Annis has highlighted, sees the potential of more employees available to come to work feeling confident that their kids are in a good place. It's an opportunity that I think Mapleton and other communities are really being smart about and taking advantage of. As you think about, Jeff, as we wrap this up, and you think about advice for other communities, if there's a punchline for a community leader who's on the fence on whether childcare as infrastructure or otherwise is an investment worth looking at, what's your advice to that community leader? Yep. Did we lose you, Mayor? I think Jeff
Yep,
there.
I'm back. I'm
There we
back.
go.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to work on the internet service here in town, I
Here we
guess.
go. Next up is broadband. I'm not sure if I cut out. I just was suggesting, do you have any kind of punchline advice for a community leader who's maybe not on the fence, but just kind of starting to get into this? What is it that helps them have confidence that childcare is in fact something a local city or local community should be getting involved in one way or the other?
Well, I'd either reach out to you or I is what I would do, and I'd defer to Jeff Andrews. Um, the math is the math, and it speaks volumes because again, you know, as has been highlighted today, it's not millions. And again, you just mentioned after it's built, are you having to subsidize it? Probably the answer is probably going to be yes for a while. Again, depending on how many slots you're building, how many slots can you fill? Again, that's what's working for us. Now, maybe you have immediately you have 80 people that are looking on a waiting list, and you could fill 60 slots right now. Well, that's different for right now. But again, looking at this because I think this will open your eyes to a lot of possibilities. And another one that I'll just throw out that we've talked about a couple times is, putting housing developments together. And again, for me, if I were a developer, I would certainly look hard at my first thing I would put in a development would be a daycare house and finding that provider and connecting with us to try to, okay, how did you get a provider? How do we do this? Because again, what an amenity to have within a housing development to have the daycare right there where you can just walk over, drop the kids off after you're done with work, be able to, again, just another opportunity. And again, as I talked about earlier, systematically being able to place daycare houses in communities where the growth is really going, making it very convenient and looking at it from an infrastructure point of view, and knowing that hey, we can sell this or rent it or whatever you want to do as a one bedroom house. And again, I don't know if other communities like ours, but when our realtor on the EDA said, "How many can you build tomorrow? I can get them, uh, you know, get them off the market for you." So I would just be reaching out and follow the game plan that we have followed. And again, it's just to me it's really slick. But get out, ask questions. I don't know how many questions we'll have today, but again, if not today, write them down. You'll have contact information, and connect and get out there and ask those questions is what I would say.
Well, I think that's good advice, right? Start with some questions, see where things go, and sometimes we see communities even before they get to the big show, as we might think about it, right? As they think about how do we even get started with getting the groundswell of support together. And one of the things that I want to highlight as an opportunity for anybody is our funding guide. We have an initial efforts funding your initial efforts for childcare. It's available on our site, and you can certainly download it. But it'll give you a quick overview of really starting that starting point, right? And you can really apply this at a small level or even a larger level. Obviously, a little few more details involved, but define what you're asking for. That's the one thing that I think is often overlooked is we just say, hey, we need money. We need money for whatever the cause is without actually getting into we're going to support building a child care house. We're going to support some grants for some new providers, engaging the community stakeholders, activating those support networks, obviously then preparing and having tools to help get that message out. For Mapleton, it's a landing page that becomes a source of opportunity for people to learn more. In your community, it may be another venue or approach that you might take it. As we get ready to wrap up, I've not seen any questions, which I think means we've done a great job of sharing today. As Mayor Annis suggested, we invite you to reach out If you're viewing this live today or viewing it after the fact, if you have questions about experience in Mapleton, Minnesota, I know Mayor Annis loves to talk to other fellow mayors and others. Certainly, our team at Business of Childcare always available to connect. And if you haven't been a part of this roundtable series, I want to thank Mayor Annis. This is the third of three that we had set out to do to really share some stories and share some opportunities. I encourage you to visit on our website, businessofchildcare.com/mayors. From there, you'll see, number one, if you didn't know, Mapleton is in fact the curling capital of Minnesota, and a lot of fun there. But there's also some debriefs, and the debrief from this session will be available as well. But the ROI is saying yes. Our April session on getting to yes as a community, all available there and all ready for your consumption. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm double checking the question panel there. I think we did a good job. Again, highlighting and looking at the spectrum of funding and understanding that each community's got a different set of inputs that will, if there were one, provide the best output from the quote unquote ATM for childcare. And we appreciate you joining us. If you have questions, we encourage you to follow up and have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.